Something is wrong with my son, and no one in this entire kingdom can tell me why. The Alpha King's voice was calm, but behind those words was a fear he had never shown before. Deep inside Raven's Heir Palace, beneath the glow of hundreds of golden candles, the most powerful ruler in the kingdom stood outside a small chamber, listening to the sound that had haunted the palace for many nights. His young pup, Prince Leo Blackwood, cried every evening after the sun disappeared beyond the mountains. The finest healers, the most experienced caretakers, and the most trusted members of the royal household had all tried to understand the reason. But every night, the same mystery remained. The child would become restless, his small eyes filled with confusion, and no one could explain what he was trying to say. King Alpha Adrian Blackwood had faced countless challenges as the ruler of Raven's Heir. He had protected his kingdom through difficult seasons, made decisions that affected thousands of lives, and carried the responsibility of an entire nation on his shoulders. But nothing had prepared him for the helpless feeling of watching his own child struggle without knowing how to help. The palace grew quieter with every passing night. Servants whispered in the hallways. Noble families offered their opinions. Everyone believed they had an answer, but nobody truly understood the little prince. Then came the arrival of Emily Carter. She was a 25-year-old Omega Maid who had recently joined the palace staff. Unlike the others who entered Raven's Heir hoping to gain favor from the royal family, Emily arrived with a simple purpose: to work honestly and care for those around her. She had no powerful family name, no royal connections, and no special position. To many people in the palace, she was simply another Omega who belonged in the background. But Emily had always noticed things others ignored. She paid attention to small details. She listened when others only heard. And she believed that every person, no matter their status, deserved patience and kindness. On her first evening working near the prince's chambers, Emily heard the familiar sound that had troubled the entire palace. The young prince was crying again. Other servants quickly moved past the door, believing nothing could be done. But Emily stopped. Something about the sound felt different to her. It was not simply a child being upset. There was something beneath it, something she could not explain. She quietly approached the room and watched from a respectful distance. She noticed the small details everyone else had missed. The way Prince Leo looked toward the same corner of the room. The way he reached for something that was no longer there. The way his tears seemed connected to a memory rather than a problem nobody could solve. Emily did not know it yet, but this small moment would change the future of Raven's Heir forever. Because while the entire kingdom saw a difficult child, Emily saw a message waiting to be understood. And the Alpha King, who had spent so long searching for answers, was about to discover that the person everyone overlooked might be the only one who could truly see his son. The following evening, the same quiet tension filled Raven's Heir Palace. The servants moved carefully through the halls, speaking in soft voices as if even the walls were waiting for an answer. Everyone knew about the young prince's restless nights, but nobody knew how to help him. For many people inside the palace, the mystery had become something they simply accepted. They believed that if the royal healers and experienced caretakers could not find a solution, then no one could. But Emily Carter did not believe that. She believed every feeling had a reason, and every person had a story waiting to be understood. When Emily returned to the prince's chamber, she did not rush forward or try to force a change. She simply observed. She noticed how Prince Leo became calmer when the room was quiet. She noticed how his attention always moved toward the same old wooden shelf near the window. She noticed how his small hands reached toward an empty space whenever the moonlight entered the room. These details seemed meaningless to everyone else, but to Emily, they felt like pieces of a forgotten story. A few servants nearby watched her with curiosity. Some wondered why an Omega Maid thought she could discover something that royal experts had missed. They believed her position should remind her to stay silent. But Emily was not trying to prove anyone wrong. She was only trying to understand a child who could not explain what he felt. Later that night, King Alpha Adrian Blackwood entered the chamber. His expression was serious, but the exhaustion in his eyes revealed how deeply he cared for his son. He had spent many nights searching for answers, and he had begun to fear that nobody truly understood what Prince Leo needed. When Adrian noticed Emily standing near the child's bed, he expected another explanation that led nowhere. Instead, Emily quietly said, "Your Majesty, I do not think the prince is crying because something is wrong. I think he is trying to remember something." The Alpha King looked at her carefully. No one had spoken about his son in that way before. Most people focused only on stopping the tears. Emily was the first person who considered what those tears might mean. Adrian asked what made her believe that. Emily explained the small things she had noticed. The way Leo looked toward the shelf, the way he reached for something missing, and the way his expression changed when certain memories seemed close. The Alpha King looked toward the shelf and felt a strange sense of surprise. He had passed that same place many times and never considered it important. For the first time in weeks, he wondered if the answer had been hidden in front of him all along. He looked back at Emily, seeing her differently. She was not speaking like someone seeking attention. She was speaking like someone who genuinely cared. The Omega Maid who had just arrived at Raven's heir had done something nobody else had managed to do. She had made the Alpha King stop searching for a solution and start looking for the truth. And as the night continued, Adrian realized that the person everyone considered the least important in the palace might be the one person who could help his son find peace. The peaceful night that followed Prince Leo's discovery brought a new feeling into Raven's heir palace. For the first time in a long while, the halls were not filled with worry and uncertainty. The young prince had finally rested, and everyone wanted to understand how a new Omega Maid had achieved what the royal caretakers could not. But Emily Carter did not see herself as someone special. She believed she had only listened when others had stopped paying attention. The next morning, the palace was filled with quiet conversations. Some servants admired Emily's ability to understand the prince, while others wondered how someone with such a humble position could uncover a secret hidden from experienced members of the royal household. Emily heard the whispers, but did not allow them to change her focus. Her only concern was Prince Leo's happiness. King Alpha Adrian Blackwood noticed that about her. Many people around him wanted recognition for their actions, but Emily seemed different. She did not seek praise from the royal family. She did not try to use the situation to improve her position. She simply continued caring for the young prince with the same patience she had shown from the beginning. Later that day, Adrian invited Emily to the royal library. The room was filled with ancient records, family histories, and memories collected through generations of rulers. He wanted to understand how she had noticed what everyone else missed. "How did you know?" he asked. Emily looked at the old books surrounding them before answering. "Because I stopped looking at the problem and started looking at him." Her words surprised the Alpha King. For years, he had searched for solutions through knowledge, strategy, and the advice of others. Those things had always helped him lead his kingdom. But when it came to his son, the answer had not been found through power. It had been found through compassion. Adrian asked Emily about her life before arriving at Raven's heir palace. She explained that she had grown up learning the importance of paying attention to people's emotions. She had often helped others who felt invisible because she understood what it was like to be overlooked. As an Omega, she had experienced moments when people judged her before knowing her. But instead of allowing those experiences to make her bitter, she used them to become more understanding. The Alpha King listened carefully. He realized that Emily's greatest strength came from the very thing others had considered a weakness. Her gentle nature allowed her to notice what powerful people often ignored. Meanwhile, Prince Leo began spending more peaceful days with Emily nearby. The young pup slowly became more comfortable expressing himself, and the palace staff saw a side of him they had rarely witnessed before. He laughed more often. He explored the gardens with curiosity. He no longer seemed trapped inside a sadness nobody understood. However, not everyone in Raven's heir was pleased with the attention Emily received. Some members of the royal court believed a simple Omega Maid was becoming too important. They questioned why the Alpha King trusted someone without a noble background. They believed tradition should determine a person's place. Adrian heard these concerns, but his decision was already becoming clear. He had spent his life protecting his kingdom, yet he had almost missed the person who brought peace back to his own family. And as the whispers grew louder throughout the palace, the Alpha King knew that standing by Emily would mean challenging beliefs that had existed for generations. The days that followed brought a quiet transformation to Raven's heir palace. The halls that once carried whispers of worry were now filled with a sense of relief. Prince Leo was no longer spending every night surrounded by confusion and sadness. He was beginning to smile again, and for many people in the kingdom, it felt like a small miracle. But while others celebrated the change, Emily Carter remained humble. She continued her daily duties as an Omega Maid, preparing rooms, helping servants, and caring for the young prince with the same patience she had shown from the beginning. She never acted as if she deserved special treatment. She never believed she was more important than anyone else. That was exactly what made King Alpha Adrian Blackwood respect her even more. One morning, Adrian watched Emily in the palace garden as she helped Prince Leo discover the beauty of the world around him. She showed him flowers covered with morning frost and pointed out small details in nature that most people ignored. The young prince followed her with curiosity, asking questions and exploring with confidence. Adrian stood nearby, realizing that Emily had given his son something the palace could not provide. She had given him a sense of comfort. However, as Emily's connection with the royal family became more noticeable, some members of the court grew uncomfortable. They believed the traditions of Raven's heir were being challenged. To them, an Omega Maid should remain in the background. They questioned why the Alpha King would trust someone without a noble family name. These opinions eventually reached Adrian's advisors. They warned him that allowing Emily too much influence could create unnecessary discussions among the nobles. But Adrian remembered the nights when his son cried and nobody understood why. He remembered how every expert had searched for answers while Emily simply chose to listen. The Alpha King knew the difference between someone seeking power and someone offering genuine care. Later, Adrian met with Emily privately. He wanted to understand why she never seemed affected by the attention surrounding her. Many people would use this opportunity to change their position, he said. Why do you not? Emily looked surprised by the question. After a moment of silence, she answered, because helping someone should not be a way to gain something. It should be done because someone needs help. Those words stayed with Adrian. He had spent years meeting people who wanted something from the crown. They wanted influence, rewards, or recognition. But Emily wanted none of those things. She had helped Prince Leo because she saw a child who needed understanding. That evening, Adrian returned to the royal archives and searched through old family records. He wanted to learn more about the history of his kingdom and the people who had quietly shaped it. As he read through the pages, he discovered stories of individuals who were remembered not because they had powerful titles, but because they had changed lives through compassion. He realized Emily belonged among those stories. Meanwhile, Emily remained unaware of the impact she was having. She still saw herself as a simple Omega Maid doing her best. She did not know that the Alpha King had begun viewing her differently. Not as a servant, not as someone who needed protection, but as someone whose heart carried a rare kind of strength. And as the kingdom slowly began to notice her, a greater challenge was approaching. Because changing one person's life was easy compared to changing the beliefs of an entire court. The tension inside Ravensheir Palace grew stronger as the opinions of the royal court became divided. While many servants and common people admired the positive change they saw in Prince Leo, some nobles struggled to accept that an Omega Maid had become someone the Alpha King trusted. For generations, the kingdom had followed traditions that placed people into certain roles. Those with noble names were expected to lead, while those without status were expected to remain unnoticed. But Emily Carter had quietly challenged that belief without ever trying to. She had not demanded a place beside the royal family. She had simply cared for a child who needed someone to understand him. King Alpha Adrian Blackwood knew the upcoming royal council meeting would be difficult. He had faced disagreements before, but this time the challenge was different. It was not about territory, politics, or alliances. It was about changing the way people saw each other. When the council gathered, several nobles expressed their concerns. They respected Emily's ability to help Prince Leo, but they questioned whether someone like her should have such a close connection to the royal household. They believed tradition should decide where people belonged. Adrian listened quietly as each person spoke. He did not become angry. He did not dismiss their concerns. Instead, he waited until everyone had finished before responding. A kingdom does not become stronger by ignoring the people who support it, he said. It becomes stronger when every person is valued for what they bring. The room became silent. The Alpha King continued by explaining that leadership was not about protecting old ideas simply because they were familiar. Leadership was about recognizing when something needed to change. Emily stood nearby, uncomfortable with the attention. She never wanted to create conflict inside the palace. She worried that her presence had become a reason for disagreement. Later, she told Adrian that perhaps she should step away from caring for Prince Leo to avoid causing problems. The Alpha King looked at her with understanding. "You believe leaving would solve this," he said. "But you are not the reason there is conflict. You only revealed a truth that some people were not ready to accept." Emily remained quiet, thinking about his words. For so long, she had believed staying unnoticed was the safest choice. But she began to realize that kindness did not mean hiding forever. Sometimes kindness required courage. Meanwhile, Prince Leo continued growing more comfortable and confident. He looked for Emily whenever he entered a room, not because he was dependent on her, but because he felt understood around her. Adrian noticed the bond between them and realized something important. Emily had not replaced anyone in his son's life. She had simply filled a space where understanding was needed. That evening, the Alpha King walked through the palace halls and remembered the night when he first heard his son crying. He remembered the helplessness he felt and the countless people who failed to find the answer. Then he remembered Emily stepping forward, not because she had power, but because she had compassion. The court could question her. Tradition could resist change. But Adrian already knew the truth. The person everyone had underestimated was the person who had brought peace back to his family. And now he had to decide how far he was willing to go to protect that truth. The days after the Royal Council meeting brought a new sense of uncertainty throughout Ravensheir Palace. Everyone knew that King Alpha Adrian Blackwood had made his decision clear, but many were still trying to understand what that decision meant for the future of the kingdom. For some, Emily Carter was still only an Omega Maid who had stepped beyond the position society had given her. But for Adrian, she had become a reminder of something the palace had forgotten. A person's worth could never be measured by their title. Emily continued caring for Prince Leo with the same gentle patience she had shown from the beginning. She never acted like someone who had gained influence. She never expected special treatment from the royal family. In fact, she often worried that the attention surrounding her would create more problems than solutions. One afternoon, Adrian found Emily sitting in the palace garden with Prince Leo. The young prince was holding the wooden figure that had once been connected to his sadness. Now, instead of bringing confusion, it brought comfort. Adrian watched as Emily encouraged Leo to share his thoughts and feelings. She never rushed him. She never told him how he should feel. She simply gave him a safe place to be understood. The Alpha King realized that this was something his son had needed all along. Not another order. Not another instruction. Just someone willing to listen. Later that evening, Adrian invited Emily to walk through the oldest part of the palace. The stone halls were filled with paintings of previous rulers, each one representing a different era of Ravensheir's history. As they walked, Adrian explained that many leaders before him had faced the same challenge. They had to decide whether to protect old traditions or create a better future. A crown carries responsibility, Adrian said, but it also carries the duty to recognize when something is wrong. Emily listened carefully. She never expected the Alpha King to share such thoughts with her. To her, he was still the ruler of the kingdom, someone far above her position. But Adrian no longer saw their relationship that way. He saw her as someone whose perspective mattered. Meanwhile, Prince Leo began showing signs of confidence that the palace had not seen before. He spent more time exploring the gardens, interacting with others, and enjoying simple moments without fear. The servants noticed the difference. The same people who once whispered about the mysterious Omega Maid now spoke about her with admiration. However, the strongest opposition came from those who feared change the most. Some nobles believed Adrian was allowing emotions to influence royal decisions. They argued that the kingdom needed to follow tradition, not personal feelings. But Adrian understood that his choice was not based on emotion alone. It was based on what he had witnessed. He had seen his son struggle. He had seen countless people fail to understand why. And he had seen Emily succeed because she cared enough to look deeper. That night, Adrian stood before the royal family portrait and reflected on everything that had changed. The answer to his son's pain had not come from wealth, power, or status. It had come from someone everyone overlooked. The Alpha King finally understood that the greatest strength in his kingdom was not always found on a throne. Sometimes, it walked quietly through the palace halls, carrying kindness wherever it went. The atmosphere inside Ravensheir Palace began to change in ways that even the oldest servants could feel. The walls that once carried doubt and whispers now carried stories of hope. Prince Leo was no longer known as the child who cried through the night. He was becoming a joyful young pup who explored the palace with curiosity, always searching for new things to discover. And many people knew the reason behind that transformation. Emily Carter had never tried to become important. She had never asked for recognition. Yet, through simple acts of patience and understanding, she had become someone the entire palace could not ignore. King Alpha Adrian Blackwood noticed every small change. He saw how his son looked more confident. He saw how the servants treated each other with more kindness. He saw how the palace itself seemed warmer than before. But he also understood that Emily's presence had changed more than his son's daily life. She had changed the way he viewed leadership. One evening, Adrian found Emily in the library reading old stories from Ravenshire's history. He was surprised to see her studying the kingdom's past. When he asked why, Emily explained that understanding a place meant understanding the people who built it. Adrian smiled because he realized she approached everything the same way. She never looked at something only from the surface. She always searched for the meaning beneath it. "You see things others miss," Adrian said. Emily looked down at the book in her hands and answered softly. "Sometimes people are not difficult to understand. Sometimes they just need someone to truly listen." Those words stayed with the Alpha King. For years, he had believed that being a strong ruler meant having every answer. But Emily had shown him that true leadership also required humility. It required knowing when to listen. As the days passed, Prince Leo's connection with Emily became stronger. He would bring her small discoveries from the gardens, share his thoughts, and smile whenever she entered the room. The bond between them was not built on royal status. It was built on trust. However, the attention surrounding Emily continued to create conversations among the nobles. Some began to accept her kindness, while others remained uncertain. They wondered if an Omega without a noble background could truly have a place within the royal family. Adrian heard these concerns, but this time he was not unsure. He knew that the kingdom had spent generations judging people by their positions instead of their hearts. He had once been part of that system without realizing it. Emily had helped him see beyond those limits. During a royal gathering, Adrian publicly acknowledged the importance of those who served Ravensheir with dedication and compassion. He did not mention status or family names. He spoke about character, loyalty, and the value of every person who helped the kingdom grow stronger. Emily listened quietly from the crowd, surprised by his words. She had never expected the Alpha King to change because of her, but Adrian knew the truth. She had not changed him by demanding anything. She had changed him by showing him a better way to see the world. And as the kingdom moved toward a new beginning, both of them understood that the greatest changes often began with the smallest acts of kindness. The first signs of a new era appeared quietly across Ravensheir Kingdom. There were no grand celebrations at first, no dramatic announcements, only small moments that showed something had changed. Servants who once kept their distance from one another began sharing kindness more openly. Families who lived beyond the palace walls started hearing stories about a ruler who listened before making decisions. And inside the heart of the kingdom, two lives that once seemed completely different had become connected by a simple truth. Everyone deserved to be seen. Emily Carter continued her work inside Ravensheir Palace, still wearing the same humble Omega Maid uniform she had worn when she first arrived. She never forgot where she came from, and she never allowed the attention of the royal family to change who she was. To her, Prince Leo was not the future heir of the kingdom. He was simply a child who deserved patience, comfort, and care. One peaceful morning, Emily walked with Prince Leo through the palace gardens. The young prince laughed as he discovered new flowers and followed the paths covered with fresh morning dew. Nearby, King Alpha Adrian Blackwood watched them with a quiet smile. He remembered the nights when the palace felt filled with uncertainty. He remembered standing outside his son's room, searching for an answer that seemed impossible to find. Now, he saw something he never expected. His son was happy, and the person who had brought that happiness was someone the world had overlooked. Later that day, Adrian invited Emily to the highest balcony of Ravensheir Palace. From there, they could see the entire kingdom stretching beyond the mountains. The Alpha King told her that leadership was not about being the strongest person in the room. It was about understanding the people who depended on you. Emily listened quietly before saying that she believed every person carried something valuable, even if others failed to notice it. Adrian smiled because he knew those words represented everything she had shown him. She had never tried to change the kingdom. She had simply reminded people what they had forgotten. Over time, the people of Raven's Heir began to see Emily differently. She was no longer only known as the Omega Maid who arrived from a humble background. She became known as the person who brought peace back to the royal family. Her kindness became a reminder that compassion was not a weakness. It was a strength that could change hearts. Prince Leo grew older, surrounded by love and understanding. He remembered Emily not because she had a royal title, but because she was the person who listened when he had no words. And Adrian carried that lesson with him as he continued ruling Raven's Heir. The Alpha King, who once believed power was the foundation of leadership, discovered something greater. Real strength came from compassion, patience, and the courage to recognize the value in others. Emily had entered the palace as someone almost invisible, but by staying true to herself, she changed the heart of a king, healed a family, and helped an entire kingdom see that the quietest voices could sometimes create the greatest changes.